Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. So if you've been wondering what is the big deal with this week's conviction of the de facto Samsung chairman's drug charge of using a very powerful anesthetic over the course of about 5 years, where he was fined about 70 million won, which is about $60,000 given the exchange rate. What's the big deal for Samsung? What is this drug, which is essentially what did Michael Jackson in? And what led him to this situation where he supposedly said he went to a plastic surgery clinic for skin treatments in order to use this medication, but then he later admitted it was because of all of the stress, and he pleaded guilty and said he was sorry. But how does this all work in with Korean society's relationship with CEOs who seem to not really have any street cred unless you go to jail? And now it seems as if you need to have like a drug charge. So let's just start with the latest news. Lee Jae-yong. He is the only son of the chairman of Samsung, who just passed away in 2020, about a year ago. Like while we were all stressed out about Cerveza, he had finally passed away. We'll get to that, but he had been in a coma since 2014 at the Samsung hospital. Just on Tuesday, he was fined 70 million won, which is about $60,000 given the current exchange rate, for using Propofol, which is a very common anesthetic when you go into surgery, over the course of about 5 years. And this Propofol is essentially the drug or anesthetic that is attributed to Michael Jackson passing away. Because remember when, if you believe the story of how Michael Jackson had hired the private doctor to go to his house and administer this anesthetic, and that's what led to the overdose where he passed away. That anesthetic essentially is just for like surgery. If you don't do surgery, a very common usage, at least in Korea, is when you get your yearly checkup and you have to do like your endoscopy or colonoscopy. Here, they usually put you under, and they use that. Or it seems as if it is also very readily available at plastic surgery clinics in Gangnam, or even skincare clinics when you're doing plastic surgery or more invasive skin treatments. But I don't think I've never come across any skin treatment where they said that, oh, we're gonna give you anesthesia. I think it's usually only if you're doing plastic surgery where like it's literally they're gonna be slicing into you. So I don't know exactly. That's what I think it was also the tip off for people being like, oh, this is really shady, because why does he come in here all the time for a skin treatment and then need to have this anesthetic? But in the past few years, this drug that in Korea is also euphemized as like the milk shot, because the liquid itself is like a milky consistency, has caught up a lot of like celebrities, and they've been very addicted to this treatment. But what kind of confuses me, because I've had, the colonoscopy and endoscopy, and it's essentially like that anesthetic where basically they're like, okay, well, we're going to give you the colonoscopy. Can you count from 10 and then go to 1? And you're just like, how am I going to be, falling asleep? It's going to take forever. And you're like, okay, fine. 10, 9, 8. And then you wake up and you're like, are we gonna do the colonoscopy now? And then they're like, no, you've been done for a while. We've just been waiting for you to wake up. That's how powerful this anesthetic is. And for Michael Jackson, his reasoning, he said that he couldn't fall asleep. And if he couldn't fall asleep, he wouldn't be able to function properly or, be able to do his world tour because he needed to get the rest. But something has been going on where he couldn't fall asleep. And that's what made me kind of confused about this drug. Like usually, like if you are doing some sort of like substances or alcohol, like you kind of want to be conscious for the kind of experience. I mean, I don't know what the point is like when you just suddenly just go to sleep. But what this seems to do, and now reason why I bring it up because I think it relates to Korea, is like the mind that cannot stop. This type of person who is full of anxiety and is constantly having to calculate, juggle, and just be nonstop thinking and therefore cannot go to sleep, I think are prime people who fall into this sort of addiction. And so in this case, he said that he was treating psychological stress related to the hospitalization of his father and his ongoing legal proceedings. So let's a little bit unpack some of the history there and what was going on in his brain, because this guy, when he's always out in the public, you have to give him credit for looking extremely cool and collected and composed, which I guess you definitely must need and want to have as somebody essentially steering the ship of about 25 to 30% of Korea's GDP. You want this guy to look like he is rational. But behind the scenes, I cannot even imagine how many things are on his mind and that he has to be constantly on top of and juggling and being stressed out about or being nervous about. Now, just having no problems and running a conglomerate of this size is stressful enough, but then having the situation during this time period of 2014 to 2020, I don't think we've really given him credit for enduring what is probably almost like kind of impossible situation for a human to endure. Not that it excuses what he did, but I'm beginning to see why he would be in this situation. And I think that it'd be interesting to think about, like, why are we putting ourselves in a situation like this where so much pressure and anxiety is going to be rested upon one individual, and that makes us a little bit nervous and anxious. So first of all, he was always like the vice chairman, right? So he's the son, right? So this is a very tricky way of running a family empire, because if the family, and this is true for almost every major conglomerate in Korea, it is founded by a family and it was owned by the family, but with a lot of help and funding from the government at first. But along the way, especially when they entered the public market to sell stocks, they don't own the entire company, but they act as if they own the entire company, make decisions as if they own the entire company, hand the company down to their kids as if they own the entire company. But usually what happens is that by the time it comes to, now he is the third generation, so his grandfather started the company, they own like single digits of the company. Maybe among their family members, they can add it up to less than half, but sometimes it's not even half of one of the subsidiaries. So how are you going to control the whole empire? So not to get into all of the weeds, but there's a lot of weird financial alchemy going on where they try to manipulate it where like, okay, if, let's say like you can't own like, like you live in an apartment building, but you act like you own the entire building and you make decisions for every single unit in there. But you don't own all of the apartment units, but you act like it because your dad built the building. But you sold it to everybody else, but you still act like you own the building and you're gonna pass on the control to your kid. But how? So one of the methods in terms of the financial alchemy is like, well, if I don't own the whole building, then I'm gonna create something that is like an entity that I own 100% of that owns the building somehow or somewhat through some sort of, and they call it cross shareholding agreement. And it's so confusing that I think most people don't even know exactly how it works. And then I don't even know if it really works, which is why people have had a lot of issues with it, which is also related to probably why he had to go to the skin clinic to relieve his stress. So let's go from the series of events that probably stressed him out. So fall of 2014, his father had a heart attack. He had to go to the hospital, and then he had some emergency stent work and he went into a coma. Now this is a huge thing, an unexpected health emergency of the leader of the biggest conglomerate in Korea, responsible for about 25% of GDP. And not only that, once you are in that position of economic power, they control literally political power and the elite power. And the whole way that Korean society operates, they are essentially like a central node. When you just say Samsung, yeah, well, do you know a little company called CJ and E&M, like all of the K-pop stuff that comes from like Mnet and CJ E&M and like the movies? Yeah, that family is also, they are related to the original grandfather that was like the brother of the grandfather started that division, like Shinsegae, like the department store, that is also part of the family. So many units of Korea. So it's not just Samsung, which is like 25% of the economy, but then once you start adding up all of the people who are related to this and are all kind of connected into this sphere, this is a lot of power. And the way that like this whole hierarchical emperor system is set up still in Korea is that stability, now that's the key word, stability is based upon the person at the top. So if that person suddenly goes into a coma, whoa, that is a lot of instability that immediately gets injected into the system. Especially because, let's just say that even if you really didn't even care about the chairman going into a coma, you have to make sure the succession plan has been complete before anything else occurs. And the biggest part that makes succession planning in this type of situation complicated are the inheritance taxes, which are like the highest in the OECD after Japan, which is basically like highest in the world. It's about like 50% inheritance tax. And so, like I said before, if they had owned the company outright, then they would have 100% of the company, and then wow, they'd be like, oh my god, we have to pay for like 50%, and that's kind of crazy, but at least they have 100%. No, they have like a smaller percentage of it. They're still really rich, but still, like, I think he was passing down about $30 billion, but like this company makes like $300 billion a year. So, I mean, this, and it has like market cap of a lot of money. And so they would have to find a way. They're struggling to pay $12 billion in inheritance taxes, and they're trying to scrounge up all this money because by having to pay that, they're diluting their shares even more of the small amount. So they've been able to create a financial alchemy to not have a lot of money, but still have some sort of like stock ownership that is a lot, and then be able to maintain control of a company as if you own the entire company. So I've always said, like, look, like there have been all these like scandals of like family controlled. Notice they always say family controlled, not family owned. Family controlled big conglomerates, and those like, younger leaders like acting crazy, and like it's just like spoiled kids. I've always said, like, you know what? If they own the company 100%, if that really is a family business, let them. Like, it's a free capitalistic economy. If they want to run their company that way and hand their hard work to like a spoiled kid, fine. That is the nature of the economy. However, the problem that you start having with a family-controlled conglomerate is that they don't own the entire company. And who else owns the entire company are investors. And it's not just rich people who are investors. It is like pension funds. So your retirement can be affected by the actions of these people who are not normally you're constrained, but they act as if like they're the rulers of this company or a country or an empire, and they're making decisions that then affect investors all around the world. Now that is kind of like the stress and the problem. So let's kind of touch upon that area. So he's stressed out, yes, about his father suddenly going into a coma, and they probably didn't finish the succession planning, which essentially means they didn't finish a way where they're like, how are we going to come up with $12 billion? Okay, so yes, they are rich. They are so rich, but most people who are that rich have like all of their assets invested, and like I said, they're invested, and that money has a purpose. If you take that money out, you suddenly lose control of the company. So you actually just need hard cash that has no other purpose or where to go. And I thought that it'd be easy for them to just snatch $12 billion out of the air, but I guess it is really difficult. And to prepare for that, they had been going through a very, I'd say shady, because Korean regulators called it shady, a shady process to make it work, and they made it work. How? With the help of then President President Park Geun-hye. And remember that whole scandal that she had with impeachment, and then her best friend, that girl who's lady who liked the boy toys, had her daughter who seemed like she was kind of like let's say a wild child, had her wild child daughter get into prestigious colleges without the grades, but just through connections and then being associated with cults and just doing all sorts of weird things, writing the president's speeches for her. Now that's what got her in trouble, and people are just like, this kind of weird language, like who talks like this? I guess like people in cults. But then she's like talking like that to the country and to the world because her best friend is like writing her speeches. How did we find that out? Just a quick reminder. Well, one of the boy toys that suddenly got mad because he was a boy toy, but then now he had to walk her dogs and do all this kind of stuff and was getting like abused by her, was just like pissed off, and then was like, well, I got your tablet PC with all of these speeches and all this other stuff. I'm gonna send it on over to the media. So that's how we got the tip off there, because the reason why this is important is that after all of this investigation over the years, let me just give you the ending. It turns out that the best friend asked for bribes from Samsung. She asked for bribes from all of the conglomerates, every single conglomerate. And she does it in the sense of like, ooh, the Olympics are coming up. The Winter Olympics are coming up. I'm like into sports and stuff, so I'm going to set up a sports foundation, and it's going to be somehow related to the Olympics or something. I don't know exactly what, but basically we're going to go to all of the conglomerates and say like, look, I'm the president's best friend, and you're all going to give me money. If you can't give me money, then buy my daughter a horse because she's into horses, and that's how like I sort of sneaked her into college, even though she didn't have the grades, and now she needs another like $300,000 horse or something, and they're expensive. And so essentially like Samsung admitted that they funded a horse, and then they funded a few $1,000,000 to the foundation, I believe. And so what I always remember is like, I think like when they were bringing up the charges to Lee Jae-yong, and like think he was I can't, I'm just trying to read his mind, but I think they were saying like telling him like, how much it was or what it was for. And then I think the expression I got on his face was sort of like, that's it? Like, wait, that's what we're getting in trouble for? Like, I'm sure like they like spread stuff out like it's a roulette table in Korea. You just gotta like throw money all over the place in order to get things done. And so during that time though, why would he be extremely also good to the president's best friend? Well, he needed, right, to come up with money in advance to eventually pay the government 50% inheritance tax, because he knew this was coming. And the whole entire organization, the company, is trying to prepare to make sure that this son is going to be able to maintain enough of his shares, his stock holdings, to control the empire. And so there was this claim that like, dang, like he basically had like $100,000 or $200,000 and he turned it into like $6 billion. How? Well, essentially it was like he had like $100,000 like within like one of these little subsidiaries of Samsung, and then they grew the company a bit. They put that on the market, and then they have another subsidiary of Samsung, and then they were gonna merge the two, and then the value of that merged company was gonna be really big. And so like if you were like an early investor at like $100,000, suddenly boom, your investment is like, they've probably set all the best Samsung accountants like figure out like, okay, this is how you get to $6 billion, like we'll do this merger. But what is on the record is actually not only on the record the National Pension Service who was against it, but all of the, like a lot of international investors. But they looked at it, they're like, this is not fair. Like the people who were already invested in the company that was going to merge with, they're like, wait a minute, I invested this money in this company, and like, I don't want this like, like weird company merging here. Like my value of my investment is going to go down. Like this is not good for me. We kind of know what's going on here. And one of the biggest people blocking that move was Korea's own National Pension Service. You know, like the fund that drives like Korea's Korea's version of Social Security. The fund managers there were like, we're against this. This might mess up all of our, retirees' pensions. However, that organization is influenceable by the president. So if the president's not allowed to, they're not allowed to tell the National Pension Service what to do. But in Korea, the president's allowed to tell, through back channels and all this kind of stuff, allowed to tell them what to do. So the charge was that, well, it's a good deal. Samsung buying a couple of horses for the president's best friend and throwing a few $1,000,000 into her sports foundation suddenly had the president then talk to the National Pension Service and say, look, approve this merger. You approve this merger, boom, suddenly he'll have enough money then to pay his taxes later on. So then I don't know what problem they're having right now, because it all went through, right? It all went through. This was in 2015, I believe, because it was before all of the stuff went down with President Park's impeachment, and this was a big part of that. So it went through, and so all of this was supposed to be there so that they would easily be able to pay all the taxes. But then right now they're still saying that they're struggling with paying the taxes in 2021, but that's a later part of the story. So here he is. His dad is in the hospital in a coma. He doesn't even know if this big old merger is gonna get through to secure his control over the company. And of course, it's not just him that's depending on this merger to secure control over the company. It's everybody around him. Like I said, all the other family members, all the other subsidiaries, you've seen a Korean drama, probably multiply that by 1,000 to see how complex it really is. It's probably all this stuff is going on in his mind. And then not to mention, you have to still make Samsung phones and semiconductors and all that stuff. And remember the Note 7 blew up and was caught on fire and so, he had a lot of stuff on his plate. And then after that happened, it went through, but then soon after, well, that president's best friend started to get in trouble because her boy toy started yapping over to the media, and then the president's own cabinet, they started, I think, to get a little bit full of themselves, and they started to alienate people within their own conservative circles. And it was they've always had kind of an internal war, it's President Park, and then there's another group that was extremely more pro-business, and that was more the President Lee Jae-yong's camp. They've always kind of had an internal mean girl war, but that intensified, and those two elements combusted, among other things. It's just a whole Pandora's box, and then led to the impeachment. The impeachment trial then wrapped up and exposed Samsung's involvement with the best friend, the bribes, and then also whether or not this merger was shady or not. So you add now an impeachment on top of the things that Mr. Vice Chairman is worried about. So dad's still in the hospital, don't know whether you can maintain control of this conglomerate, and now you have this impeachment crisis. What the heck is going on? So during this time, so then the impeachment crisis ended at 2017. So then after that, so now it's 2017, but we still haven't seen the chairman. Supposedly he's still in a coma, and people are a little bit busy, and they just, I think in general, don't really care or just trust that, okay, he's probably in a coma, but then other people are like, is she really still alive? I don't know. This seems a little bit shady. Yeah, granted, anybody in a coma at that kind of social strata, you don't want to see, have images, nobody would say that, yes, well, we're gonna show you Even though like in 2015, I believe, they did like show a picture of him in the hospital bed like from far away. But other than that, there had been absolutely no images or sightings, just statements from the hospital saying like, oh yeah, well, we take him out on a wheelchair and, you know, he's kind of doing okay, but nobody has ever seen him, right? And like one thing that I think was a little bit really kind of, just as an aside, a little bit scary and shady, and I don't know, like, yeah, you're probably monitoring this because, you know, the technology, like, yeah, they could probably monitor everything, and I think they did. Basically, it was like a January in 2018 on a Friday night. A friend of mine who's also a fellow journalist met with the guy that was essentially the point person at like the Wall Street Journal who covered Samsung. And then we're just like talking and doing all this kind of stuff. And I was just like, yeah, like I've just been like reading, you know, like on Twitter or like on the blogs, and like, yeah, like, you know, there's people saying like, oh, he's not even really there, and blah, 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 you know? What happens on Monday? Boom. Huge press releases go out saying like, oh, update on the chairman's condition. Saying like, oh yeah, he's still fine. He's still alive. He's still in a coma though. He's still okay. Everything is fine. I was like, this is a little scary. But anyways, as an aside, like, this is how high stakes I believe it is, where, you know, maybe they're like monitoring people's phones and stuff. Okay, so all of this came to an end in October 2020, you know, right when we were in high restrictions based on cervezas. So that was a very convenient time because we were not really focused on this funeral. Not a lot of people could attend in person because of restrictions. And so they did the funeral, and around this time, it apparently seems he stopped going in for treatments for skin, you know, beautification that involved anesthesia. So I think that's a little bit coincidental that maybe now things have settled. He has less anxiety because now he can finally, whether or not Daddy was there, it's over. That could be laid to rest. He doesn't have to worry about that anymore. The whole fallout and consequences from the impeachment has been pretty much settled with the courts of he probably doesn't have to go back to jail, especially now that he is too important to jail, and that's another thing here in Korea. And so during this time, he's also, right after the funeral, they were figuring out how to pay the inheritance taxes, and now they are making some deals. And before they announce their plan, so they have to announce the plan of telling the government, okay, we know we have 5-year, you give us a 5-year plan. The government, they say like, we're going to tax you 50%, but we'll give you a 5-year plan to pay for it. And so I guess everybody who is subject to, you know, this kind of like societal level then drafts their 5-year plan and sends it to the government. This is how we're going to pay all this money to you. But an odd thing was, before they do this, is that they also try to make, they said they did a lot of donations to reduce the taxable base. So if you remember, in April of 2021, tons of art, the entire art collection had been donated to different institutions in Korea. They had to pay about 12 trillion won, which is about, you know, we'll just say $12 billion in inheritance taxes. But these arts and antiques were worth nearly 10 trillion won, or about $10 billion, but still, that didn't go towards the $12 billion bill. It just reduced the total bill so that the end bill would be about $12 billion. But this is a lot of art. But this is how then you start to see, like, is it a donation? Is it a payoff for political patronage? Now, this is what I want to show you in steps of this is how the real big players in Korea do business. Because before we get into the art, I just wanted to compare it to recently, a few weeks ago, the government also here in Korea is grilling tech leaders over their monopoly. And so one leader in particular, the Kakao chairman, our version of a WhatsApp and like the whole ecosystem that goes beyond messaging, it is like a whole empire. And it's a really high growth, innovative tech company doing a lot of great things. And you could see him, he's like an older man still, and Korean man, but wow, it looked like he had gone up through the system, not playing the game the same way, the same dysfunctional way, and he walked in and he had that same look that everybody has, like when you are just like, are you serious? It's this bad? It's this dysfunctional? Oh my God. But not like you can do anything about it. It's like, how do I survive this? And he said, you can tell by the language that he was forced to use. He said that he would try to do a better job in donating more money to the public in order to deal with his successful growth of the company. Now, this is a little bit strange because we're talking more about, they were grilling about regulations, about like the fees that they were charging, I guess, to app developers or whatnot, but they wanted to resolve this through donations to society. But that is actually code for donations to politicians and the projects that they control. Because when they say donate to society, donate to this cause of, building a public works, or like donating to public health, or donating to, but then it's all a project where there's a big budget and then it goes out to all their friends. And so they're like, as long as you take care of us the way that all these other conglomerates have been taking care of us and like playing the game, then you're good. Then we're not going to go after you. And I think you could see on his face, I'm just surmising again from his face, like he's just like, what the heck is this? Because I've visited Kakao before, and we've done the whole like kind of like insiders tour, and at that company they greet each other by their first name in English. So even if you don't have an English name, you make up your own English name, and that way they immediately cut out all of the power games and politics of Korean hierarchy by being able to have everybody call each other by their first name. And wouldn't you know, super high growth rates, very functional system. Like that app just keeps churning out new great things. I mean, they're in fintech now. I mean, you can't live without Kakao Talk, and it's just an amazing, amazing service. And so you could see that like he is not running this company according to the same games that like a lot of these politicians who are probably still stuck in 1960 are playing, but they're asking, please, handout, give us, give it to us. And how is it done? Well, you have to do it really slick. And I'll show you exactly how slick, because I think this even passes by most Korean people because they didn't even see this coming. So let's go back to the art. So the art pieces, that's $10 billion of art. When did he have time to go shopping for all these pieces of art? Well, I broke it down. So 23,000 art pieces. Let's just say he died when he was 78, but he went into his coma when he was about like 72. But so let's just say he started buying art when he was in his 30s. So like spent 40 years of buying art. That's 575 pieces a year. 48 pieces a month, 12 pieces a week, or essentially a few every day. So I guess this was probably their thing. Maybe that's how, like, that's the thing that they did every day, like kind of like always like, ooh, cool, run the company, buy art, run the cool company, buy art. Like that was their, that was their thing. But they were able to amass so much art, and it went to, they made sure to regionalize it. Now, this is when this is political as well. So they went to 5 regional art museums, but it also went to the National Museum of Korea. And then it also went to the Artist Institute. Artists, if there was a famous Korean artist, they usually have their own art museum or institution, but sometimes they don't even have much of the art of the original artist because, these rich billionaires have it. And so he gave them, sprinkled it back. But then they also made a big deal of which areas that they gave it to. And well, he had some like famous, like fancy European stuff like Monet, Chagall's, Dali's, Pissarro's, Renoir's, and of course Korean masterpieces as well. So it went all out. Was that it? No, that was just the art. Well, here's another $1 billion. So yeah, they have to pay all of this inheritance tax, but in order to pay it probably strategically, they got to pay some more money. So they decided to donate 1 trillion won. This is about $1 billion. And in name, it's to boost the medical sector and to increase the country's medical infrastructure, including Korea's first hospital for infectious diseases. So $500 million would launch a new hospital specialized in disease. So whenever there's like a new project or something, that means it's basically all y'all friends who, are going to get the contract to build it, supply it, I don't know, send in like, who's going to be the milkman. All of that, suddenly that $500 million becomes part of, the please do something good for society, which basically means like, please give me some money and then I'm going to give it to my friends. And then it comes back to me. And so that was $500 million. $200 million went to establishing a national research institute for infectious diseases under the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency. Anytime you have research institute, it's essentially like, okay, yes, it is important to have minds solving problems, and we do have great minds in Korea solving problems at institutes, but a lot of these jobs at these institutes are essentially going to like social dilettantes or like people who like are being rewarded for political patronage. They don't really do anything. I mean, it's just another avenue to reward somebody politically or whatnot. So $200 million there. Then $300 million is going to go to the Seoul National University Children's Hospital for Cancer Research. Great name, great. I hope it works. I hope that's true. But anytime, they're always like, also, Seoul National University is another node and a hotspot to then be able to reward or get things flowing to the nation's elite through. It's essentially like the Harvard of Korea, and it's more than just an institution. It is essentially like a social class and club full of connections. And so if you're in that network, then boom, somehow that $300 million is going to be able to go to all of the right people who need to be influenced. So that's how you do social good and be able to make your donation to society and then, play this game. Oh, and we didn't even talk about when the government was really stressed out about how there is a jobs crisis in Korea. Well, then they got Samsung to announce that they're going to be investing hundreds of billions of dollars in new infrastructure to support industries that will then create jobs, which is fine if it was announced in a very business-oriented context, but it was announced during a meeting with the prime minister and other politicians. So you see, the audience is obviously political. If it really truly was a business first decision. Like, why would it be in that kind of an environment? And so it was very important for Samsung to signal, we are doing this for the country. We are doing this because we are too big to jail. And then we also needed to release the vice chairman or chairman now to be able to go and finalize this deal with Moderna to then get the Moderna recipe for, the Cerveza shot and take it over to Samsung Biologics and then have them make it. And then now we're going to have a lot more vaccine supply in Korea and then be able to start supplying it for the rest of the world. And that really needed the push of the number one emperor. And so he is too important to jail. But what is the price of staying out of jail and making sure that your, inheritance tax plan is accepted? Well, all of these great social initiatives that somehow, I will guarantee you, it doesn't seem as if the money is going to ever end up, really benefiting like the actual people. It's probably going to be like definite the way that it always is, doled out, and then the people like who are connected in terms of like providing the services to get it all running, it kind of stops right there, and it's a nice payout. Okay, so I was trying to keep it, really succinct and just trying to streamline it, but anything that deals with this kind of real life drama on a high level drama is a little bit complicated. So hopefully that kind of like clears it up and kind of explains like, maybe why he was having to go for skin treatments and suddenly it all stopped, because maybe he has a lot less to worry about because now perhaps the plan is in motion, and now that it is, maybe the rest of us can be more secure in feeling like things are going to go well with Samsung, and maybe the stock price will go back up and the economy will be fine because it accounts for so much of Korea's economy, and that will have plenty of semiconductors and vaccines and cell phones and TVs and washing machine, everything. But at the same time, do we really want to be in this situation for the next generation? Like, are we going to be forever in a crisis of succession? So do we have to reform corporate governance, and do we have to reform the inheritance tax system in Korea, which people say is too high? All right, guys. Well, let me know what you think below. I don't hope this wasn't like too like heady or weedy, but if you stayed here for this long, this is something that you wanted. All right. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Tune in next time. Don't forget to subscribe. Find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Love you.